polynomials. Monomials, again, one term, power to a power. So when raising a power to a power, you multiply the exponents. And the rule looks like this. You have one base, x, and then you have two powers. That's why it's a power to another power. Right? Two powers to one base. Right? If you're multiplying like bases, that's a little separate. Right? That's each x has its own power, xm, xn. Here it's x to the m to the n power. Then you multiply m times n. You can put a dot in there if you want to, or you can put parentheses around it, however you want to do it, to denote multiplication, but x to the mn power. You multiply m and n together. So here, x to the fifth squared. So this just means by the rule, x to the fifth, so x to the 5 times 2, which is x to the 10th. So I want to think about this. I want to think about this in a thought cloud out here. So, okay, what does it mean to square something? Well, when you square something, that means x to the 5th times what? X to the 5th, right? And we know from our rule of like bases that we add them. So that's x to the 5 plus 5 is 10. But if we don't know that rule, we say, okay, what is x to the 5th? That means x times x times x times x times x. And then x times x times x times x times x. Right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 x's, which is where we get our x to the 10th from. All right? So x to the 5th means x times x 5 times, and then the same thing for the next one. And if you put all those x's together, that's 10 of them. So however you think about this, that's what ends up working out. But squaring something is x to the 5th times x to the 5th in this case. And you can add the 5 and 5 to get 10. But if you don't remember that rule, you can write all the x's out. You don't want to get into that because, look, here you're going to write 10 x's 4 times. I mean, Christmas will come, but you won't even be done. Okay? And you can pretend like it's January if you want to. It'll still take all year. All right? Don't do that. Don't write that. Take you forever. All right? So here we have m to the 10th to the 4th. So the rule says m to the 10 times 4. I'm going to use a parenthesis there just because I used a dot up there. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. M to the 40. You just can't write 104 because then that's 104. That's different. All right, leave that there. C to the 6th to the 7th. Again, 1c, 2 powers. That's when you know to multiply. C to the 6 times 7, which is what? C to the 42. C to the 42. And then P to the 12th to the 3rd. This is going to be P to the 12 times 3, which is going to be P to the what? 36. Okay? Again, 1P, 2 exponents. That's when you multiply them together. All right? So all those are just what I call rule problems. Okay? Literally, you're just applying the rule. So now these are just a little bit bigger. Okay? And I went ahead and, like I said, these are more basic up here, and then this one's just a little less basic, a little more advanced, but that's okay. We need to see one just so you know it's there. It can happen. All right. So let's look here. Negative 8n squared. And on this one, I did this on purpose. I can square a negative number, which is hugely important to know how to do. All right. So I'll throw that in anytime I can, anywhere. All right. So here, this is a single term. Remember we said this was monomials. If this were 8 minus n or n minus 8 or 8 plus n, where it was 2 terms, I couldn't do this. But because it's one term, I can do this. You take every factor, negative 8's a factor and n's a factor, and you raise it to whatever power is here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say this is negative 8 squared times n squared. And it goes in parentheses. The negative 8 has to. And you need to put the n in there too because of what could happen next. So here, negative 8 squared is negative 8 times negative 8, and that is positive 64. Just a side note here, if you had negative 8 squared, that equals negative 8 times 8, which is negative 64. You're squaring this first and then applying the negative last. If it's negative 8 squared, then that's negative 8 times negative 8, and 2 negatives makes a positive, and that's 64. There's a difference. Okay, so want to make sure you know the difference there. So now I'm through with my little aside, all right, my little footnote that I wrote down there. So 64, and then n, this is really a 1, and 1 times 2 is what? 1. So the n squared is n squared. It's just what it sounds like. All right, that's almost hard because it's so easy. Look at 4n to the 5th to the 3rd. Is this one term? Yes. Be careful, it's one term, but it's 2 factors. factor and factor, okay? So then you take each factor, 4, and raise it to the third, times n to the fifth and raise it to the third. What is 4 to the third power? 4 times 4 is 16, times 4, 16 times 4, 40 and 24, 64, okay? So 64, and that's one you need to have kind of committed to memory, 4 cubed is 64. And then n to the 5 and 3. So there's one n with 2 powers. That means you multiply. So what is 5 times 3? It's n to the, well, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. 5 times 3 and show it. It's going to be 64 n to the 15th power. 64 n to the 15th power. And then here, negative 2 p v to the third c to the 11th to the 4th power. So again, this is all one term. It's a lot of stuff in there. How many factors is it? 1, 2, 3, 4 factors, but one term. So we take every single factor, negative 2 to the 4th, p to the 4th, v to the 3rd to the 4th, and then c to the 11th to the 4th. So that's going to be negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Well, a negative number to the 4th, right? The first 2 negatives make a positive. The next 2 negatives make a positive, and that's all 4 of them. So that's a positive. And then 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 times 2. That's 16, and it's positive. And then we get p to the 4th. Then we get v, and this is going to be what? 3 times 4, and c to the 11 times 4. So then the only thing I need to do is simplify that and that, right? 3 times 4 is 12, and 11 times 4 is 44, right? So we're going to come out here, 16, p to the 4th, v to the 12th, c to the 44th, and that is our final answer there, all right? So 16, p to the 4th, v to the 12th, c to the 44th. All right, so I hope this helps with raising a power to a power.